Hey everybody, it is your instructor Patrick, and I'm back with you to discuss our introduction to this course, English 125, Critical Thinking. So the title of this lecture is Think Better, because that's really all this class is setting us up to do. It's showing us how to think better. Now let's start the slideshow. Play from start. Good. So here we are. There's no formula to becoming an excellent critical thinker. There's no one way to do it. That would be like saying there's one way of becoming a good musician, a good actor, a good baseball player. We all go through different paths to become better thinkers. We're going to examine some different ways of thinking critically throughout the semester, and I'm going to need you to try them all. But the goal for us this semester is to see what processes actually work best for you, the ones that lead you to the best, the clearest critical thought. Okay, so we're going to try a bunch of stuff. You try on a bunch of different hats. You see which ones fit. Make sense? Good. So let's look at what you actually do well in terms of critical thinking. So when you're in a debate or you're in a class, do you ask questions? When you're given assignments, do you read them carefully? If you're being asked to look at visuals, films, images, anything in a class, are you looking carefully? When other people talk, do you listen carefully or do you fake it? Now there's a value to faking listening carefully sometimes, but when people that matter to a debate are talking, or people that matter to a subject or talking, do you really listen? Do you avoid rushing to judgment? Do you admit ignorance or prejudice? Do you gather more information if you need more information about any subject? Do you seek out the opinions of others? Do you consider public sentiment without depending on it? And do you listen to your instincts when necessary? These are all things that help us think more critically. Not all of us do all these things. It would be impossible for us to do all of these things all the time. We would be inhuman. We would be C-3PO from Star Wars. We would be Spock from Star Trek. That's who we would be. So I'm strong at a few of these things. I'm weak at some others. And I teach this class. So don't worry about it. And then the flip side are establishing what you do poorly. Or the flip side is, do you not ask questions in a debate or in a class, in any setting? Do you read carelessly? Do you look at information carelessly? Are you a bad listener? Do you rush to judgment? Do you deny or take pride in ignorance and prejudice? And look at this failed M dash here. I'm so mad at myself for that dash. Attention to detail, Patrick. Do you avoid gathering data when talking about a subject or when studying a subject? That's no good. Do you seek out too many opinions? Do you rely too much on public sentiment? Do you just see what other people think and then go along with that? Do you overvalue your instincts? So, think of your crunchy, sort of hippie-ish aunt and uncle who live on a commune up on the coast, and they're always talking about, their spirit animal or their instincts that drive them. You do too much of that, and people start looking at you funny. What do you know well? And we can also look at this same list and many other things to help us see how we're good critical thinkers. So do you know your community? Do you know yourself? Do you know politics? Do you know science, economics, business, literature, visual arts? Do you know how a disease works? Do you know a specific social issue? What are things you know well? What are your subjects that are your ways into the world? So for me, I know writing pretty well. I know teaching of writing pretty well. I know baseball pretty well. These are sort of my ways into the world. These are the subjects that help me see the world better in strange ways. But, by knowing baseball and watching managers, I know how to sort of manage classrooms. So by establishing what you know, you can figure out ways and the lines of thinking, more importantly, that will make you a better critical thinker. The tools you basically have to think better. The tools you have to relate to the world better. What do you need to know better? Same stuff. I could absolutely get a great benefit. I would benefit greatly out of knowing science, economics, disease, all better, right? I'd be better, a better person, a better thinker if I spoke a second language or a third language. Those would make me a better thinker. Prejudices. I'm not telling you mine. You don't have to tell me yours either, necessarily. So these can stay in your mind and in your heart. Do you prejudge people because of race, sexuality, gender, religion, economic class? Do you not like jocks? Do you not like nerds? Do you not like gangbangers? Do you not like preppy kids? More importantly, why do you have these prejudices? Think about it this way too. Do you believe in specific stereotypes about a group of people? If you believe in specific stereotypes, you pretty much have a prejudice, right? You prejudge people for being a specific thing. But we all do it, whether we admit it or not. So, now that we've looked at that sort of inventory and thought about who we are, we can look at 3 ideas that will run this course. These next 3 ideas are 75 to 80% of the course, easy. If you keep this information in mind, if you keep these questions in mind, the class is going to go a lot smoother for you. The first thing you're going to think about is, what is a text's purpose? Whether it's an essay, an advertisement, a lab report, whatever it is. What is the author trying to sell you? What is the author trying to get you to believe or do? That's the first thing we want to look at when we're reading anything for class. 2, what's the payoff for the author? So what does she or he get out of convincing you to think or act a certain way? And a lot of times this is explicit. A lot of times this is implied. So if it's an advertisement for Schick razors, you know right away they're trying to get you to buy Schick razors. There you go. In other instances, it's not that clear. You don't necessarily know what the author is trying to get you to do and what's in it for them. And sometimes this is hard to find. Sometimes you don't find it, but we can try. We can try. Big idea number 3, and this is at least half the class. The other stuff's very important, the other 2 questions. But half the class is really me figure out how we're sold, to figure out how others persuade us. So what we're going to now do is look at specific tools of persuasion. We're going to look at how we're sold. The base and the basic methods of persuasion that are found throughout society and throughout history are as follows: sex, money, comedy, and fear. Think about Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton is starring a new Carl's Jr. ad in which she is scantily clad in a bikini with another blonde woman, and they're in a barn eating a cheeseburger together, and it's oddly sexual. It is clearly intended to titillate, to get you to go to Carl's Jr. It is intensely blatant. But also think of it this way. It's not just the male gaze that is affected by persuasion. There's a reason why the guy that plays Thor. And there's a reason why Steve Buscemi from Boardwalk Empire, who plays Nucky Thompson, doesn't play Thor. Sex appeal is something that companies and organizations and even politicians rely on. Money. Can you participate in a deal if the price is right? One of the reasons that junior colleges are so popular, it's not because they're local. It's not because you didn't necessarily apply or get into a good four-year school. It's because the price is right. It's a huge reason. It's a huge driver for people to go to junior college. And think about every car ad that ends with a price tag. Lease this car, lease this Mercedes, lease this BMW, or own for X dollars a month. And you look at it and you go, I can do that. Comedy. Sometimes the best you can do is make someone laugh. So look at Geico and the Geico Gecko. If you do an ad about Geico Insurance without the gecko, it's probably not that interesting. It's probably not that memorable. If you do an ad for Progressive Insurance without Flo, it's just an ad about insurance. It's nothing to talk about because insurance isn't that interesting. But if you can make something funny, you can engage people. You can persuade people to at least listen to your point. And obviously fear. The next political cycle, the next election cycle, you will have every candidate trying to scare you into believing that if you vote for their opponent, all hell will break loose and your life will get worse. That's just what they do. Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, everything in between. If we can scare you, we can maybe persuade you to do something. But that stuff doesn't necessarily work in academia. So if you're in an academic setting, if you're in a four-year school, a graduate program, certificate program, your instructors aren't necessarily instructed by, or aren't necessarily persuaded by sex, money, comedy, and fear. At least they shouldn't be. Or they're in the wrong line of work, right? And you're probably with a sketchy professor. But here's what we value as professors. First of all, it's called ethos. Appeals to authority. You try to persuade us to believe something by bringing in outside expert opinions to solidify your case. Okay? So when you bring in outside sources to a work by an expert, that tends to persuade English professors. Pathos, you can appeal to emotions, you can tug on people's heartstrings. Sometimes that works. It's not the most successful and the most useful tool in academia necessarily. Logos is the big one. Appeal to our sense of logic. Just connect the dots and show me how A leads to B leads to C. Use common sense. That is a huge tool, an incredible tool to persuade your professors that you know what you're talking about, or to persuade the readers of your academic essays. Throw the logic out there. Concession. Concessions are nothing more than admitting that people who believe differently than you have a good point. That's it. You don't need to do it all the time. It shouldn't be a majority of the paper, but maybe at 2 or 3 sentences on occasion would help your case greatly. It also makes people feel like what you're writing is less of an argument and more of a piece that is intended to persuade. And then tone. Stay diplomatic, stay classy. The coolest head wins in every argument, with very few exceptions. And then there's a little base and a little academic. So narratives. People love stories. People love stories. Think about dates. If any of you is in a couple, right? So you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife, you're going to go on boring dinner dates with other married or almost married people. And the first thing that's going to happen when you sit down, before you even get your cocktail or your appetizer, someone from the other couple is going to say, tell us how you met. And you got to recount the whole story over and over again. And the longer you do it, you and your partner will make stuff up just to keep it interesting. Logical fallacies. We're going to be shipping you to a website that has a bunch of them, and you're going to be reading those for this week. So enjoy. Logical fallacies are common errors in thought either spoken or in writing. So stereotypes. Ad hominem, where instead of trying to pick apart your opponent's argument, you just pick apart the person and you bag on the person. Anticipating resistance. So think about it this way. If I'm a big university, big expensive university, it costs $50,000 a year for students to attend. My goal is to figure out how I can combat that sticker shock. What would keep you and your parents from resisting attending my school? So I'm going to build a website, or part of the school's website will be devoted to information just for parents on financial aid. Because if you got into Columbia University and you want to go, and your parents want to send you, but they don't know how they're going to pay for it, and that's a sticking point between you going and you not going to Columbia. Columbia University needs to address that, needs to anticipate that resistance. So you go there, you go to columbia.edu, and you will find probably significant language on financial aid in a section probably for parents. Anticipating needs. So I had friends visit the Napa Valley recently, and they went to Auberge, the big fancy resort, and there was one night out of 4 that they didn't have a reservation. So they go to the concierge. They say, we need somewhere to eat tonight. We don't know where to go. Where should we go? And they're thinking they'll just go to some local cantina. And wouldn't you know it, the concierge got them into French Laundry. So what we can probably guess is that the French Laundry and Auberge send each other clients whenever they can. That's a good relationship. And Auberge probably anticipates that its clients who can afford expensive restaurants will need contacts at expensive restaurants. So they went out and got it. Brilliant. What drives people to act? Maslow's hierarchy of need. Maslow was a psychologist. He said that humans are driven by very basic things. Starting from as basic as the need for sleep, the need for food, to as lofty as self-actualization. That is the desire, the drive to become the very best version of ourselves, whatever that may be. I'm going to get you a copy of that for this week's assignment list. I want you to check it out. But that's a big thing that corporations think of whenever they're trying to pitch us something. So look at all that stuff, okay? And that, my friends, is all you need to know for this video. I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to press stop and enjoy the next part of the assignment.